When she came back from the bathroom, her mood had reverted to its usual cold, aloof demeanor, completely unrecognizable compared to just moments before. "Are you okay?" "Of course," she replied curtly, her tone sharp and brusque. "You don't look okay at all. Are you mad about what I said earlier?" "No. And it doesn't matter anyway. I just don't want to waste any more time on this." "Where did Miss Brown go, the one who was just talking to me so nicely a few minutes ago?" She rolled her eyes and let out a long sigh. "She's just remembering exactly who you are. All right, let's just get this over with already." With that, she turned her attention back to her food. Damn it. Here we are again, back where we started. Maybe she really is a bit unreasonable. Even so, I can't stop thinking about her, and I'll never give up easily, unless I can be absolutely sure that being with her is as perfect as I've always imagined. For the rest of the dinner, Miss Brown remained sullen and silent throughout. No matter how hard I tried, she refused to continue our conversation. As we got up to leave, I was seething with anger, and it was clear that she, too, was holding back her frustration. Tension between us seemed ready to explode at any moment. Perhaps this was exactly the breakthrough we'd been waiting for. I deliberately placed my hand on her back, hoping to guide her toward the exit, but instantly felt her entire body tense up. She glared at me fiercely, yet still kept walking forward. "If you don't remove your hand right now, I'll lose my temper," she said through gritted teeth. When we stopped to grab our coats, she forced a perfunctory smile, though it was obvious she was doing it just to keep up appearances. I slid my hand lower, resting it just above her hips. As the blonde hostess handed her the coat, she immediately stepped forward to take it, using the opportunity to evade my touch. After quickly muttering a thank you, she stormed out of the restaurant in a huff, and I followed closely behind. She stopped on the sidewalk, her coat draped over one arm and her arms crossed tightly across her chest. We had to wait for the valet to bring the car over. "I just don't get why you've suddenly gone ballistic," I said teasingly as I stepped closer to her. "Get lost," she snapped. "I think scientists shouldn't swear like that." "Leave me alone," she muttered, pulling her phone out of her bag. "What are you doing?" "I'm calling a taxi to take myself home." "Dinner's over, and you promised you'd stay away from me. Now keep your word." "No way. The date isn't over yet. I brought you here, so I'm taking you back." "There's no need, I don't need it either." "I don't care. It's the rule." "What rule? You made it up yourself? Stop stalling already." Her eyes blazed with fury, as if she were about to pounce at any moment. I wish she'd just do it, anything, as long as I could have the chance to hold her in my arms. "I really think you ought to relax a bit, Miss Brown. If you keep tensing up like this, you'll only end up more agitated." I waited for her to slap me, but nothing happened at all. She simply closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Just then, the valet parked the car beside us. On the drive back to her apartment, the atmosphere in the car was so oppressive it almost felt suffocating. I struggled with all my might to keep myself from pulling over halfway and crossing the line. Anger, desire, and frustration mingled together inside me, and I knew she must be feeling the same way. What a stubborn woman. Before parking below her apartment building, I locked the car doors to prevent her from suddenly making a run for it. As soon as she unbuckled her seatbelt, she did indeed try to open the door, but when she realized it wouldn't budge, her shoulders slumped down in defeat. She leaned back against the seat, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she took a deep breath. "Could you please just open this damn door?" She stared up at the car roof, her tone laced with impatience. "Not until you tell me exactly what's going on." "Nothing's happening. We were fine, until you suddenly threw a tantrum and went right back to being that annoying self you always are." "Damn it. I did exactly what you asked, didn't I? I agreed to this stupid bet, now just let me go." "You're absolutely impossible. What do you want from me?" She sighed deeply. "Do you want me to say maybe you're not as bad as I thought? Maybe you are. But it doesn't matter, not to me, anyway. Now who's being unreasonable?" Losing my patience, I unlocked the car door. She turned to get out, but then hesitated. "Sorry, okay. I've got a ton of stuff to deal with right now, and it's all just driving me crazy. She gazed out the window at the empty street, her voice tinged with a barely perceptible weariness. At that moment, I thought she'd burst into tears right there in front of me. "Good night," she said, turning to leave. But I didn't want her to be alone, especially not now. "Can I walk you upstairs?" I asked, calling her back. She turned around, gave me a faint smile, and shook her head. "You're never going to give up, you?" "I'm just walking you to the door," I replied. "You really are," she sighed, then said with a laugh, "Fine. But once we're up there, you'll have to admit you've lost." She grinned, and I nodded in agreement. We stepped out of the car and I followed her up the stairs, through the lobby, and finally into the elevator. The 15 seconds I spent alone with her in the elevator were enough to rekindle that taut, electric tension, and they made me think again about what she was wearing beneath her skirt. The scent of her perfume nearly drove me wild, and I felt an almost irresistible urge to pin her against the wall. The pale skin at the nape of her neck and along the neckline of her blouse exuded an alluring fragrance. Throughout the entire ride, she kept her gaze deliberately averted from mine. As the elevator doors slid open, I couldn't help but wonder, why hadn't I mustered the courage to act just now? "Have you lived here long?" I asked casually as we stepped out of the elevator, glancing around. Her income must be pretty high, if not, there's no way she could afford an apartment in a neighborhood like this. My eyes couldn't help but linger on the back of her figure ahead of me, and the fluttering sensation in my chest grew stronger and stronger. If I got any closer, I'd probably no longer be able to hide my desire for her. Maybe I'd get lucky, she'd invite me in. No, more likely, she'd kick me right out. "Just over a year," I said, following her to a door at the end of the hallway. She paused and turned around. "We're here." Then she grinned triumphantly, her eyes locking onto mine. My attention was completely riveted by her lips. I fought desperately to suppress the urge welling up inside me, to press her against the door and kiss her deeply. Just then, her gaze flicked past my shoulder and landed on something. Before I could even turn my head fully, I saw a man standing in an open doorway across from us. In that instant, her chest pressed against mine, her hands wrapped around my neck, pulling my face toward hers. Her soft, full lips met mine, igniting emotions I'd been holding back all along and sending me spiraling completely out of control. I clutched her waist tightly, my fingertips digging into her skin. I took a step forward, pressing her against the door, my body oppressed hers, and with a long, tender kiss, I poured out all my longing. She softly moaned against my lips, her hands gripping my shoulders tightly. I leaned in eagerly, wanting her to feel the burning passion I had for her. I completely lost control. My only desire was to slip off her dress, kiss every inch of her body, and hold her tightly against the door. Her body fit mine so perfectly, our lips and teeth intertwined in perfect harmony, driving me wild with desire. We had to stop for a moment to catch our breath, locking eyes as our breathing grew uneven. She pushed me away from her chest, visibly shocked, and I, too, was still reeling. It was then that I finally realized what she'd just done. "Were you just using me to provoke your ex-boyfriend?" She shook her head, still dazed. "So it turns out I'm the one who's been the jerk all along. I'm sorry. I was wrong." She turned around and started rummaging through her bag. "What are you doing? Didn't you hear me? I was wrong, now just leave." "Are you kidding me?" "Good night," she said, opening the door and stepping inside. With a loud bang, she slammed the door shut, leaving me standing in the hallway like a complete fool. What on earth was she thinking? I turned around, hoping that Jerk hadn't been lurking in the hallway and seen her throw me out. But he was already gone, and the door down the hall had closed behind him. I turned again toward the door she'd just slammed shut. It seemed Miss Brown was even more heartless than I'd imagined. What should I do now? Should I knock on the door? Drag her out? Demand that she explain herself? After all, if she's going to act this way, she might as well have invited me in, just so I could take a good look at that damn lingerie. Right now, I'm burning up with frustration, both frustrated and feeling like a complete idiot. Damn it. I'm struggling to suppress the urge to just burst in there and beg her to take me back. At least this means I've won that bet.
The moment locked the door, my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might jump right out of my chest. What just happened? Why on earth did I do that? I sat down on the sofa, staring at the door, trying desperately to steady my breathing. I prayed he'd just leave, because I had no idea what I'd do if he knocked on the door. My legs still feel like jelly. This was such a mistake. Damn Todd. It's all his fault. I ended up acting like some hysterical woman. That jerk actually dared to text me in the middle of the night, driving me absolutely crazy, and then I ended up taking out all my anger on Ethan like some clueless fool. First I got inexplicably mad at him, and now I'm using him to get rid of Todd. This truly was the worst idea of my life. And now, I clearly realize what I've been missing all along. I tasted his kiss, felt his tall, strong body pressed tightly against mine. Just that alone was enough to make me lose all sense of reason. I had no idea what would happen next. I sat on the sofa for a long time, trying hard to process everything that had just occurred. Then, dragging my weary body into the bedroom, I collapsed onto the bed wearing nothing but a nightgown. As soon as I closed my eyes, his kiss, his touch, and the heat of his body as he leaned close to me, all of it flooded my mind. Before I knew it, my breathing grew erratic, my fingertips traced over my skin, and every thought in my head was consumed by his image. This wasn't right. Such thoughts shouldn't have existed in the first place, yet I couldn't help myself, couldn't stop craving to be held by him. I bit my arm to stifle the moan that was about to burst forth, trying to calm the tumultuous emotions swirling within me as I lay alone in bed. Panting softly, I reached out and gently stroked the empty space on the other side of the bed, imagining what it would feel like to snuggle against his broad chest, sensing his body heat enveloping me. I truly lost all sense of reason. I shouldn't have been thinking about Ethan, not to mention fantasizing about how he'd look lying here in my bed. That night, I'd had a scorching dream in which the blonde-haired, brown-eyed man was incredibly intimate with me. Early Sunday morning, I was jolted awake by an excruciating headache, feeling as though I'd just woken up from a brutal hangover. Perhaps this discomfort was the price I paid for my guilt. The moment I thought about using Ethan to get rid of Todd, I wanted nothing more than to sink into a crack in the ground. I'd never felt so deeply regretful, and I dared not even begin to imagine the consequences of what I'd done. When had I become such a reckless person? Before this, every decision I'd ever made in life had been carefully thought out and guided by reason. Maybe all that's happened recently has really thrown me off balance. I took a quick shower, torn between whether to tell Anna everything or not. I could almost picture what she'd say. "I told you so, Ellie." She'd be right, wouldn't she? How could I have ever thought getting involved with Ethan wouldn't hurt? If only I hadn't gone out of my way the night before to avoid his advances and then, instead, ended up acting like a complete fool and throwing myself into his arms, I might have still been able to salvage things. Ellie, you're such a contradiction. Just when you were about to step inside and close the door, you had to go and do something like this. By the time I finished showering, it was raining fiercely outside. I changed into a robe, finished breakfast, and picked up my phone. The thunder rumbled loudly, and I walked over to the window, wondering whether I should give Anna a call. Maybe I shouldn't have told her that I'd once willingly fallen into Morgan's arms. But there's nothing I can hide from her. After all, she's my best friend. The sudden sound of a knock on the door made my whole body freeze. I stared at the door, and then another knock followed right after. Who could it be? After everything I'd been through, I was utterly unprepared to face Mr. Morgan. Still, I forced myself to move my legs, walked over to the door, and opened it. I simply couldn't believe my eyes. Standing right in front of me was Todd. "Good morning, Ellie." His hair was damp, as if he'd just gotten out of the shower. "What do you want?" I asked coldly, crossing my arms over my chest. It seemed my plan to take advantage of Ethan hadn't worked at all, and now I had an even bigger problem to deal with. "Can we talk?" Yeah, obviously this approach was completely useless. "Do you really think there's anything left for us to talk about?" Just looking at him made me feel miserable. "Did you see my message?" I did, but I was really busy at the time. Actually, I deliberately ignored his message, pretending he didn't even exist. Oh, really? You certainly looked pretty busy last night. Is he your boyfriend? Seriously? It's none of your business. I just want to talk to you, Ellie. We already had our last conversation ages ago. It won't take long. I'm asking you, just hear me out for a minute, please? Maybe if he finished what he had to say, he'd just disappear completely.
Fine.
But once you're done, you've got to leave me alone. I opened the door and let him in, led him over to the sofa, and sat down first myself. Go on. I sighed, my gaze drifting toward the rain-soaked window outside. Could you at least look at me while you talk? He said as he sat down. No, I don't want to look at you or hear a word you say. In fact, I'd rather never see you again for the rest of my life. Just his mere presence was enough to drive me crazy. Why did he have to keep pestering me like this? You claim you've already forgotten me, but judging by how furious you still are, it's clear that's not true. Couldn't you just try to understand where I'm coming from? Oh, I understand exactly where you're coming from. I know full well that your work means more to you than anything else in your life. Maybe I should even thank you. Thanks to you, I've finally realized that I should have been focusing on my own work instead of plunging headfirst into a relationship that existed only in my imagination. I had a mountain of things I wanted to blurt out, words that had been building up inside me for far too long. Ellie, you've always been so important to me. Then why did you come back? Why didn't you just stay there forever? I asked through gritted teeth, my anger burning fiercely in my chest. What do you want from me? Do you want me to beg for your forgiveness? I've already tried, Ellie. I've tried to make you understand me. I wanted to hold on to everything we once had. The problem is we never had anything to begin with. And you've never done a single thing to change that. What did you think I'd do? Stay here, day after day, waiting for you to come back while you're out there doing whatever you please, stringing other people along. Is that really what you had in mind? You expect me to keep waiting for you indefinitely? You know exactly what I want, yet you do absolutely nothing about it. Now, it's all too late. If all you're looking for is my forgiveness to make yourself feel better, then just make sure you never show up again, and I'll forgive you. I growled angrily, my vision blurring with rage. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Can't you see that I care about you? It's always been you who chose to ignore me. You're the one who turned things into what they've become. Do you want me to keep waiting for you forever? Waiting until you finally decide I'm worth it, worth your promise, worth taking seriously?
Here we go again.
Always getting hung up on these damn labels. We once had something beautiful, and that's all that really matters. Enough. When you finally grow up and are willing to take responsibility for your own mistakes, you'll understand what it feels like to be with someone who only gives you hope but never offers you any security. Todd, you made your choice a long time ago. Right now, you're just my past. I stood up and walked away from him. I didn't want to hear another word he had to say. It was exhausting. I don't want to relive the pain he once inflicted on me. Ellie, just get out of here. Pretend I never existed. I walked toward the door, ready to kick him out. Just as my hand touched the doorknob, he grabbed my arm, forcing me to turn around and meet his gaze directly. At that very moment, my heart gave a sharp pang, and my pulse raced uncontrollably. Those damn eyes, no matter how hard I tried to resist, my body still betrayed me, against my will. It's me, Elle. I'm still the same person I've always been. He reached out and gently cupped my face. I closed my eyes tightly, then yanked free from his grip with all my strength before he could do anything I'd regret for the rest of my life. I flung open the door. Get out! I roared at Todd, but as I turned, I found myself staring straight into Ethan's eyes, who was standing right outside the door. My heart suddenly went into overdrive. The hand he'd been raising to knock on the door now hung limply at his side, and his gaze darted back and forth between Todd and me, brimming with scrutiny. Mr. Morgan was soaking wet, as if he'd just been pulled straight out of the rain. Had he really walked here through a torrential downpour? Todd pushed past me in a fit of anger, and Ethan stepped aside to make room for him. His eyes followed Todd all the way down the hallway until he heard the sound of the apartment door closing. At least, that's what I assumed was Todd returning to his own place. Then his attention shifted back to me. You're quite the quick one, aren't you? he said with a hint of sarcasm, sizing me up from head to toe before turning away and shaking his head in exasperation. What was he thinking? Did he really believe that Todd and I were together? Given the scene unfolding right before his eyes, anyone would probably come to the same conclusion. I stepped out of the apartment and quickly followed him. Wait a minute. I know this looks bad, but things aren't exactly how you're thinking, I called out to him. And by the way, why are you soaking wet? I couldn't help but raise my hand to cover my mouth and let out a soft chuckle. You think this is funny? He spun around sharply. Looks like you're the only one who can find amusement in making fun of me. Don't make such a big deal out of it. Miss Brown, as far as I'm concerned, that's exactly how it is. Oh, really? Then in your eyes, what exactly is it? I shot back, refusing to back down. He took a step closer, too close, deliberately encroaching on my personal space. I tried hard to keep my balance, forcing myself not to recall last night's scene. Standing here without my heels, I felt especially petite compared to him. Just thinking about having to tilt my head up to meet his gaze made me inexplicably irritated. You're nothing but a hypocrite, using me to get back at your ex-boyfriend, he said, staring intently into my eyes, every word carefully enunciated. I struggled not to notice his alluring lips, nor to think about how irresistibly tempting it would be to pull off his soaked knit cap and run my fingers through his hair. Ellie, stop thinking about such useless things. No wonder you looked down on me so much after last night. I really do feel ashamed of what I did. I'm sorry. You're apologizing? He asked, his face full of skepticism. If you've made a mistake, shouldn't you apologize? So that makes me the mistake?
No.
My mistake was, my voice trailed off, and my gaze involuntarily drifted toward the end of the hallway, where Todd's door stood. Was he perhaps listening in on us right now? Shall we just go inside and talk? I suggested. We're standing right in the middle of the hallway. Your clothes are soaking wet, and I'm still wearing my pajamas. Are you really serious about having this conversation out here? Before he could even answer, I turned around and headed toward the apartment, hoping he'd follow. But when I stopped at the door and glanced back, he was still standing exactly where he'd been, frozen in place. I watched him quietly until finally, after what felt like an eternity, he gave in and took a step forward, entering the apartment. Being alone with him in my apartment clearly wasn't a good idea, but I had no other choice. Did you sleep with your ex-boyfriend? As soon as I closed the door and turned around, he couldn't wait to ask. My God, no way. And it's none of your business. Why on earth would he care? There'd never been any real connection between us in the first place. None of my business? He repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. What do you mean? None of my business? Are you kidding me? After something like that happened, you at least owe me an explanation. His soaking wet clothes were simply too conspicuous. His heavy, dark sweatshirt clung tightly to his body, and if this kept up, he'd surely catch a cold. Even worse, he was dripping rainwater all over my wooden floor. How on earth did you get yourself soaked like this? If you keep going like this, you'll end up catching a cold, and you've already made a mess of my floor. Hurry up and take off those wet clothes, then we'll talk. Just a while ago, you wouldn't even let me touch you, but now you're suddenly asking me to take off my clothes? You're really moving fast, he teased. Don't you dare get sassy with me. So, what do you suggest? Should I just let you wear my pajamas? He scanned me with a playful look, his tone dripping with sarcasm. How amusing. Just for saying that, I should kick you right out. Go to the bathroom and change your clothes. I'll take yours to the dryer. It's not too late to thank me later, he said firmly. I'm fine, he insisted stubbornly, prompting me to let out a frustrated sigh. What a stubborn man. You're fine, my floor isn't. You'll have to pay for the damage when it's all over. The bathroom is right over there. There's a bathrobe in there. It should fit you just fine, I said, pointing toward the bathroom door next to the living room. You should know that even if things were like this, we still wouldn't be even. Don't push your luck, Morgan. He sighed and finally gave in, turning around and heading toward the bathroom. My nerves were stretched to the breaking point. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of ice water, and tried hard not to picture him undressing in the bathroom. Oh my God. This was absolutely the worst idea ever. A few minutes later, I made my way to the bathroom door. I clear my throat. Could you hand me your wet clothes? I'll take these to dry, he said suddenly, opening the door and giving me quite a fright. He was wearing one of my white bathrobes, and the knitted hat he'd been wearing earlier had already come off, leaving his hair slightly tousled. The robe's collar was slightly open, revealing just a glimpse of his strong, well-defined chest. I made an effort to keep my gaze fixed on his face, deliberately ignoring those unbidden, suggestive thoughts that kept popping into my mind. How long will it take? He asked as he handed me the wet clothes. At least 30 minutes. Are you planning to tell me? How exactly did you end up looking like this? I asked, glancing down at the heavy, damp garments in my hands. I was out running, he replied. Running in this torrential downpour? I raised an eyebrow, puzzled as to how he'd even managed to get all the way over here. Aren't you supposed to apologize to me for something? He snapped, frowning impatiently and crossing his arms over his broad chest. Did you run over from home?
No.
I was already out jogging, and I just happened to be passing by, so I decided to pop in for a quick look. I nodded, but my mind was filled with confusion. Why on earth would he make the effort to come all the way over here? All right then. I'll be right back. Feel free to sit down. As I turned to leave, I paused briefly and glanced back at him. Don't get too comfortable, I warned, narrowing my eyes slightly. He just shook his head, completely ignoring what I'd said. I took his clothes to the tiny laundry room, tossed them into the dryer, and then returned to the living room. He was standing by a floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the relentless downpour still raging outside. I cleared my throat to get his attention. Before I even apologize, why did you come here in the first place? I stopped beside the sofa and asked him, doesn't it seem pretty obvious? You owe me an explanation. I thought I'd made myself perfectly clear. I figured that as soon as Todd saw me with you, he'd just back off and give up. But instead, it had the opposite effect. You really expect me to believe that nonsense. Whether you believe it or not doesn't matter. But that's exactly what happened. So I'm sorry. I acted impulsively, without thinking things through. It was my fault. You're truly unbelievable. I spent the whole night trying to get closer to you, and in the end, you actually think it's funny to use me and then shut me out. He took another step toward me, and instinctively, I crossed my arms over my chest, adopting my usual defensive posture. What do you want me to do? I've already apologized, and I've admitted I was wrong. You always say things like that. Do you really think a simple "I was wrong" can fix everything? Right now, he's just a step away from me, and my body instantly goes on high alert. What I meant by wrong refers to what I've done, I said. Didn't you ever think that if you'd invited me in then, I wouldn't have gotten so upset? What? Of course, he'd hoped I'd invite him in at the time. Though I'm reluctant to admit it, deep down, there was indeed a part of me that had entertained that very thought back then. Since you're going to take advantage of me anyway, you might as well do it more gracefully, he teased. I already told you. I was acting on impulse. There was absolutely no premeditation. I was just really frustrated because he'd texted me during our dinner. So that's why you treated me so badly in the middle of the night. Because of that? That's none of your business. I'm sorry, okay? You should apologize with your actions. Finish what you've started. Do you really think I could fall asleep after you just left me like that? His gaze roamed over me, and as I stood there in my black satin nightgown, I felt suddenly utterly exposed. The thought that he, too, might have lain awake at night, tormented by thoughts of me, just as I'd been tormented by longing for him, made my heart race even faster. I've already apologized. My breathing grew increasingly rapid, so much so that it was becoming hard to even form a coherent thought. Stop apologizing, it only makes me angrier. And besides, you lost the bet. What? You can't count it that way. Do you usually open the door dressed like this? He suddenly interrupted me, closing the distance between us once more and fixing his gaze on my chest. Then, without warning, he reached out, and in that instant, I held my breath, my body going completely rigid. Wearing it like that, the fabric clung to your skin, and I could faintly see the outline beneath, he said softly, his fingertips gently brushing across my chest through the satin fabric. I closed my eyes, my body trembling uncontrollably. What was he doing? Stop. I managed to force out, yet my body seemed to crave more, almost against my will. I tried hard to steady my breathing, but my heart was pounding so fiercely it felt as if it might burst right through my chest. But your body's reaction says otherwise, he murmured in a low voice. I opened my eyes, feeling his breath brush lightly against my cheek. Our lips were mere inches apart. My body felt utterly drawn to him. My hand instinctively reached out to grasp his hair, yearning to press my lips firmly against his. Just say it if you want it, he urged softly. I knew that if I didn't break free soon, things would only spiral into a direction I couldn't control. I frantically searched deep within myself for the tiniest sliver of reason left. Just say it, he commanded in a firm tone, yet his voice trembled involuntarily. In those profound eyes, hidden longing and unspoken resentment surged, locking onto me with an intensity that left me no room to escape. I opened my mouth, but my throat felt as though something had lodged itself there. No sound could escape. Reason screamed wildly in my mind, urging me to push him away, to flee from this place, but my body seemed enchanted. My fingertips began to tremble uncontrollably, and even my hand rose of its own accord, reaching out to gently brush against his furrowed brow. He seemed to see right through my inner struggle. Far from closing in further, he slowly lowered his eyelids, his gaze settling on my lips, which had taken on a faint blush. His voice grew softer still, tinged with a barely perceptible plea. Just say one word. You want it. That plea was like a feather, lightly tickling the strings of my tightly wound nerves. I instinctively wanted to step back, but my heels felt as if they'd been glued to the floor, completely immobilized. In every breath I took, I could smell the crisp, fresh scent of rain mingling with the faint fragrance of his bathrobe, wrapping me tightly in its embrace. At last, I managed to force out a single word, my voice hoarse beyond recognition. I wanted to deny it, to rebuke him for his trespass, but as the words formed on my lips, they turned into a silent sob instead. His fingertips still lingered on the satin fabric of my nightgown, motionless yet radiating an intense, searing warmth that seemed to burn right through my skin, melting away even the last remnants of my resistance. He slowly raised his eyes, and the longing in their depths almost overwhelmed me, but there was also a trace of cautious restraint, as if the instant I uttered a single no, he'd instantly pull away. This restrained intensity was far more devastating than any overt coercion. It tugged at me relentlessly, tossing me back and forth between surrender and clarity.